Hi, my name's Lavina. In this talk, Dr. Tesh tells us about her story, her experiences of being a doctor, and the good and bad sides of medicine. Dr. Tesh shares some really great content on her Instagram page. Be sure to follow it. We've included the link in bio.
Hello, everyone. I'll just let you know a little bit about myself. So I'm a GP. I've been practicing for the last 5 years as a qualified GP. I qualified from King's Medical School in London. That was about something like 10 years ago. So obviously my medical school journey started about 15, 16 years ago. I had absolutely no idea what I was doing when I applied to medicine. So I don't think I was as structured as everyone else. My family were just very keen for me to become a doctor. I tried doing everything else. I did work experience in primary school teaching, work experience as a lawyer, and I thought I'm just not going to be a doctor because my family are saying that I should do it, and that's not a good reason to do a career. Then I went and did some A&E work experience, fell in love with it, and ended up applying, and the rest is history, really. So I think work experience is a really good thing to do if you've not already done it before applying to medical school. It is definitely worth it. So my talk today is on what is it actually like to be a doctor. And I think this is really important to know because a lot of you might have relatives who are doctors, parents who are GPs or hospital consultants, and then you have a much better insight into what life is like as a doctor, but maybe you don't have an insight into what junior doctor years are like. Dr. Juhi gave a really good explanation of the sorts of things that you'll be doing in those first few years as a doctor and what medical school is like as well. I'm going to take a kind of broader approach so that I can tell you a little bit more about those experiences from my perspective, because every single doctor has a different take on what medical school was like, what being a doctor has been like, and as the Medapply staff has said, I took a slightly different approach with my own career. So the aspects that I'm going to cover today are, so you want to be a doctor, start with your outcome, and I will explain what that means. Ideal qualities of a doctor as well. So these are the sorts of things they might want you to be talking about in medical school interviews. And also career paths with a medical degree, because you can take lots of different avenues with your medical degree within clinical medicine, which is where you see patients, but there are also ways that you can use a medical school degree to do other jobs. And that might be a path that you go down, and a couple of my friends have done that and really enjoyed themselves. So it's definitely not one size fits all. So I've said always start with your outcome, because a good friend of mine who's my mentor, like my GP mentor, he's a medical director of one of the big private medical companies in the world, actually. He's really, really quite high up. He was a GP at the practice that I worked at. I developed him as a mentor because I just chatted to him as part of the training. So when I was training as a GP, I would go and talk to him about patients that I was seeing, and you develop relationships with your colleagues, and then they can become your mentor, where in future years you just grab a cup of coffee with them and talk about how your career is going, what you're doing, what different opportunities are available to you. And the one thing he's always said to me over the last 7 years that I've known him is always start with your outcome. Know what it is you want to achieve by going into any decision in your life. And so with medicine, I'm asking you, what's your outcome? What do you want from your career? A good way to start with this is there a doctor you know that you'd like to be like? Is that the reason that you've decided that you want to apply for medicine? It could be someone in real life, like your parents or family member, like I'd mentioned. It could be a doctor from TV, so someone like House MD, or you watched DR or something like that, Holby City, and you thought that looks pretty interesting as a career. It might be a doctor from the movies or from a book. You might be really into Chekhov or something like that, if you're very, very into the culture. Or you might have liked to become a doctor because you did work experience like I did, and you realized that it was just the most amazing adrenaline-filled job and incredibly challenging, very satisfying, and there's nothing else like it that I've ever come across. So another way to look at this question, what are you trying to achieve from becoming a doctor, is looking at your values as a person. And I think it's really important to always think about what your core values as a person are. Are you interested in contributing to society, contributing to your local community? Are you interested in contributing to your family, being the person that's able to give them a little bit of sort of knowledge if they come to you with a strange looking mole, or if they've got a chest infection, they just want a little bit of general info, although as a doctor you can't specifically treat anyone that you know personally, because there's an issue with that. But if you want to be the person who knows a little bit about when someone's sprained their arm, what to do, then that's quite a useful thing as well, to be able to contribute in that way. Are you somebody who works really hard now? I'm assuming all of you here are very, very hard workers, otherwise you wouldn't be thinking about going into medicine, because you do need obviously very good grades to get in. You can access medicine through other ways as well, but you generally are going to be a hard worker if you're thinking about this career. Are you looking for financial stability? Now, everyone always says this, and it's true. If you're looking for a job that will give you lots of money, if you've got the kind of educational background to get into medicine, then you could probably get a job that will pay you more. Like, you could go into a different career. If money is your final outcome, what you really, really want to be very, very wealthy, then that's probably not the best reason to be going into medicine, because especially for the first 10 years after you qualify as a doctor, your first junior doctor years, and going forwards from that, the equivalent of what you would be earning and the kind of debt that you'd be in when you come out of medical school, it doesn't compare to people who've decided to go into finance or jobs in the creative industries, those sorts of things. You will have friends who come out of school and earn a lot more than you for the first 10 odd years of your life, potentially. But as you get more senior as a doctor, as Dr. Juhi said, things do change. You have the potential to earn a lot more, go into other things as well on the side as well. So, but finance shouldn't be the real major reason that you're going into medicine. I wanted to start with the downsides and then go on to the good sides, because I want to give you the bad stuff and then move on to the good. So Dr. Juhi already touched on a few of these kind of downsides of becoming a doctor. Those first 10 to 15 years of medical school training and being a junior doctor can be really overwhelming. It's because there's loads of information that you're going to get. People are going to be wanting to teach you all the time. You're going to have loads of exams, just like Dr. Juhi said. It's not a bad thing. Each time that you get an exam, you get a chance to kind of prove your knowledge, get better, improve, and feel kind of that satisfaction of learning more. So you will always have that satisfaction of you are learning and growing, progressing through life. But it can become really overwhelming, and lots of doctors, I think it's really important for you to know at this stage, lots of doctors do have the kind of personality types that are a little bit highly strung. Maybe they might have issues with things like OCD, anxiety, low mood, those sorts of things. It's very common, but that's partly just how doctors, to an extent, have always been through the decades, through the generations. Doctors are work hard, but people who work really hard but sometimes get the balance wrong. And now we're becoming much more aware of mental health, so it's less of an issue. If you do struggle at this time, don't be put off a career in medicine. But if you do struggle with things like anxiety, depression, OCD, anything like that, make sure that you get support early in your medical school training. Let the medical school know and see what help is available, because there's loads more help available now than there ever has been in previous generations. You will end up probably doing unpaid hours as a junior doctor. Like I said, if you're only in this for the money, or the main thing is to become, have a BMW, which I do have. I have a really nice 5 Series BMW, I won't lie. I have a nice, comfortable life. But that took a long time to get. I was driving a banged up car, like a little tiny Peugeot, got off my brother, had loads of bangs from my brother, not from me. But for a long time, you're basically earning very little compared to what you're potentially worth if you were doing a different job. And a lot of hours you will end up getting paid nothing, just because you have to stay and help people. And that is the key thing with being a doctor. You're not staying because you're trying to make a good impression. You're not staying for lip service or to help some big corporation get more money. You'll usually stay to do unpaid hours so that people don't suffer so much, so that you're giving a valuable contribution to somebody. You might stay so that you can have a discussion with a family, just like Dr. Juhi said. You might have a discussion with a family about someone who's very, very ill, and it's important what you're doing. Even if it's simple, like taking someone's bloods late in the night, you're staying because you're doing something that's going to help. You've got a job that's got societal value. You will also be working night shifts, bank holidays, weekends, not all of them, but there might be a substantial number of bank holidays and things that you'll miss. You might sometimes miss Christmas or come very late. It's going to annoy your families, it's going to annoy your friends. Sometimes you won't be able to schedule your holidays the same times as your loved ones. It can be really frustrating. Those are the sorts of things that are very annoying, especially in the first 5 to 10 years when you've qualified as a doctor. But then, as I said, as you get more senior, you start to have more control over your life, where you go, what you do, what sort of hours you're willing to do, and you can put more terms into that as well. You might have something called imposter syndrome. I kind of touched on that with feeling out of your out of depth. The thing with medicine is, even if you feel like you really know your stuff, you've got all distinctions in med school, like Dr. G, he said, I will concur, I learned most of my stuff on the wards. And the way that you learn is by getting things wrong and getting things right. So you're going to have times when you feel like you're not really meant to be doing this job. Like you've somehow managed to scrape through. You don't know how someone's not discovered that you don't know what you're doing. But that's actually how most people feel in medicine at some point in their careers. I can quite confidently say that because that's what lots of my friends and peers say. Now, that's not to say that it's true. You cannot practice medicine if you're not competent. So whatever level that you're at, your medical school and your teachers and consultants in the hospital, they will be holding you to a high standard. They will be teaching you what to do and you will be supported. So you should never be in a situation where you genuinely don't know what you're doing and don't have support. But it's important to know that you might feel a little bit out of your depth and impostery, especially for the initial years. That goes actually, and I'll touch on that on my next slide. That does tend to get better as you go through your medical school. Once you've got through medical school and once you've got through your junior years. You might also be worried about doing harm as a doctor. It's important to know that you are working with members of the public, and members of the public have different levels of knowledge about what you're meant to do as a doctor. You'll see it in the newspapers, lots of articles, especially in big publications like the Daily Mail, the bane of many doctors' lives, although we all love to have the Daily Mail feed of shame and read it. But a lot of members of the public don't understand why doctors make certain decisions that they do. And that lack of understanding can mean that they think you've done something wrong when you've done the right thing, and it can get blown out of proportion very quickly. The biggest issue that causes problems for doctors is if they don't communicate well with patients or the patients' families, and that is often what leads to complaints, and complaints can turn into lawsuits. Now, many doctors will face at least one lawsuit in their lifetime. I luckily haven't faced one, but that doesn't mean that every day I do think about it. You know, like it's on in the back of my mind when I'm seeing a patient. I hope they don't sue me. And not all jobs are like that, where you'll have that fear in the back of your head. I don't want to do this person harm. I don't want them to think I'm doing them harm. I don't want them to sue me. Now, there is protection. Once you're a doctor, you can get insurance so that you've got legal backing. And you have to do that when you've qualified as a doctor. So there are ways around this, but it's not a nice thing to have in the back of your head. So if you're somebody who gets really, really concerned about that sort of thing, it's worth thinking, you know, is that what you want to be thinking about in your career? Now, as you get more experienced, again, that feeling goes, you start to be more confident in what you're doing. And the better that you communicate and learn to communicate with patients and their families, the less likely that sort of thing is to occur. And many doctors don't ever go through that situation as well. But it's just worth thinking about, because certainly with everything that you see in the news about GPs, doctors apparently causing harm to people, or possibly actually causing harm to people and being sued, it can be a nerve-wracking thing. And it's just worth thinking, is that something you want to have in your life as a possibility? Now, of course, in any career, it's potential for something to go wrong like that. But with medicine, you are dealing with people's health and their lives. So just do your best, basically, and make sure you're always supporting in what you do, get help, and you should be absolutely fine. So the good sides of being a doctor, why do we do this if there's all this potential for stress and upset? Well, as you develop and become more senior, you start to get something called clinical intuition. Now, clinical intuition, it literally means as you become more senior and you see more people who are ill, and you learn more, you study more, because you're always studying as a doctor. If you see different doctors' Instagrams, we're always posting about different illnesses. That's because we read in our spare time. So you kind of got to be a little bit of a medical geek in a way. You've got to be interested in the subject and learning. You're also seeing lots of patients. At this point in my career, I've seen many thousands of patients, dealt with lots of different situations. But on day one, when I first went onto a hospital ward in year 3 of medicine, I had never seen a patient in real life who was my patient, or in a team that I was helping to support. The more patients that you see, the more patterns you start to recognise with when people are ill. You can start to just know if somebody is seriously ill, if they're a little bit ill, or if actually they're fine and they need some reassurance. And that clinical intuition is really, really useful. It's your gut feeling that you have about something that builds over time, and it's something really to be proud of. And I feel proud of the clinical intuition that I have, and being able to say, okay, something needs to be done now. Oh no, this is okay. It's a really amazing skill once you've got it, and it really reassures members of the public. And it's something that is quite respectable as well. It's the reason that still senior doctors especially are valued in society. They have a lot of respect from all sorts of different people from different backgrounds. And that's why you'll see that people go, ooh, when you tell them that you're a doctor. You might even feel, I feel a bit embarrassed telling people that I'm a doctor, because they kind of hold you to this pedestal, but there's a reason why that is. Investigations and treatments for illnesses for patients, they're always changing. So if you think about things like CT and MRI scanners that you see on television, on the news, and you might have seen in real life, they weren't available like 50, 100 years ago. Things are always changing. There are new techniques available now and much more widespread, like robotic surgery, that were just coming out when I was in medical school. So you will always be learning. There will always be a chance for you to get involved in the development of new things that are going to help multiple people potentially around the world. So depending on what you do, you could be a part of something that creates genuine benefit in the world. There's camaraderie and a real sense of community between medics. So you'll find that doctors really do have their own kind of group. And this is just natural because you spend 5-6 years in medical school, and then you might be training with some of them as well. You're in high intensity situations, life or death situations, in hospitals with people, adrenaline's pumping, you're working as a team, you build friendships. You might also build anti-friendships or people that you don't get on with as well. So you're gonna have a lot of politics, you're gonna have a lot of drama potentially. There's no getting away from that, but it makes for really interesting kind of work, really unusual situations. You might have friendship or some sort of dispute with somebody working on your ward, all sorts of things, but it keeps things interesting at least, and you learn how to resolve things. You have to mature very quickly as a doctor, and I can comfortably say that myself and all my friends were completely different people after each year that we've practiced medicine to the previous year. And it just accelerates as you carry on. You get more maturity, you learn more, you become more confident. You'll never stop learning in this particular field. But the friendships also they extend into Instagram as well. You'll see that a lot of us have an Insta fam, and this is one of the lovely things about medicine. I found, my tribe of people that I really love, different doctors from different specialities, and as a doctor you do have a natural kind of clicking with a lot of other doctors from around the world. You've been through common experiences, and that is something that bonds you with a lot of people around the field. So it's worth knowing that you might not ever meet these people in person, but you kind of understand what they've gone through, and you've shared similar experiences wherever you've been, and that has the potential to create friendships throughout your life. And I know that sometimes it can be difficult to build friendships in adult life compared to when you're younger and you're in school, but certainly as a doctor it's helped me to build up some really amazing friendships and people that I learn from, and I'm really grateful for that, and I wouldn't have got that if I was in a different career. The highest privilege of being a doctor is, in my opinion, it's to be invited into other people's lives. Like I've said, you're working with members of the public, and not all careers involve working with members of the public. It's got its downsides. Like I said, they could see you, they could hate you, they could shout at you and scream at you, all sorts of things. But at the end of the day, members of the public on the whole are incredibly grateful for what you do. And they also let you into parts of their lives that they might not even told their partner. You will be told about things that you aren't expecting to hear. If you build good communication with a patient, they might tell you about abuse they've suffered as a child. They might tell you about thoughts they're having about killing themselves. They might tell you about all sorts of good things as well, lovely things that have been going on in their lives. You're going to be there for those moments when people pass away, loved ones of theirs are gone. You're also going to be there for those celebratory moments when their child is born, when they finally gotten over the cancer diagnosis, they're in remission. There are so many upsides and things that will make you smile. And of course, there's always laughter as well. It's just the most beautiful speciality in those moments where you're laughing with a patient about something. You find some joy in all the rubbish that's going on. And I'll tell you what, in every single day that I've been in medicine, even the really rubbish days, there's at least been one laugh with somebody, whether it's a colleague, or a patient something that's just been really sweet, touching, humbling, and human. And I'm not sure where you will get that in other careers. I'm sure there are, but with medicine, it's intensified. You also have the ability to help many people in their greatest time of need. It is, like I said, this is a job that has societal value. You are helping people when they really need it, when they're most vulnerable. It's something you need to respect as well. You're going to have to help them at times when you're not feeling your best as well. At those times, you should ask for support. But you have this set of skills that you've worked incredibly hard for, and you're continually improving. And that set of skills can mean the difference between pain and comfort. It can mean the difference between life and death as well. So it's a really great thing to do. And it's a way to contribute just by going to work every day to society. So what do you want a doctor treating your own family to be like? That's the question I asked myself, because the lovely people at Medapply asked me about what are the ideal qualities of a doctor. And this is what I'd say. What do you want your own doctor to be like? Somebody who is treating your mum or your dad. You want them to be competent, number one. So I could talk about communication skills all I want, but at the end of the day, you need to know what you're doing. And if you don't know what you're doing, you don't know what to do with a patient, you can ask for help. Always ask for help. Don't just wing it. Know what you're doing and do the right thing. You also want to be a lateral thinker or creative thinker. It is not essential in medicine, but it can really help. Just like Dr. Juhi said, one of the most important things in medicine is to be flexible and be able to adapt. Things like the COVID-19 crisis are a great example of that. So people have had to change the roles that they're doing and the way that they train last minute, and you will have to do that as a doctor. Teamwork's also really important. So she'd already touched on this. You work in teams on the ward, and you also work in teams even in general practices as well. You need to rely on each other to support you when times are hard, and you also need to be able to teach each other and get along even if you don't feel like getting along that day as well. So being a great communicator is important. Lots of people aren't natural great communicators when they go into medical school, even if they've done well in the interview. Some people struggle with it. Some people have different difficulties, so they might be on the autism spectrum, something like that makes it a bit more difficult with communication. Get support in that case. Get specialist help from the medical school as well. And you will also get communication skill training throughout your medical career. So medical school, and then also when you go into specialties like general practice, for example, you will get loads and loads of communication skills training, how to do a consultation, how to manage when someone's upset or angry in front of you, all sorts of things that are actually useful, transferable skills that you can use in your everyday life as well. You'd expect a doctor to be empathetic. It is not essential, because I have met some doctors who aren't empathetic, but it definitely does help if you can put yourself in the shoes of the patient and feel almost what it's like to be them and what they're going through, because that will help to guide you to help them the best and give them the options that will help them. You'd also expect a doctor to be caring and care about what they're doing, care about the person in front of them that they're helping. You'd also want a doctor to be resilient. Even if you don't feel particularly resilient right now, if you're really struggling in yourself, there are ways that you can get better, speaking to your own GP, speaking to the medical school, and build up strength and thick skin, which does, your skin will get thicker as you get through all the training in the junior doctor years, and you go through different experiences, and you will learn how to deal with all sorts of situations that other people don't really need to do in their jobs generally. So career paths in a medical degree and career paths outside of clinical medicine are the things that I'm going to cover now, and then that's the end of my talk, and I can talk to you in the panel discussion after that. So within clinical medicine, once you've qualified and got your medical degree, you could take the traditional routes of becoming either a surgeon, hospital medic, or a GP, or you could go into anaesthetics, which is where you put people to sleep, but you also manage life-threatening situations where people have crash falls and they're very ill in the hospital. You would be leading that in anaesthetics generally. Within each of those, you can go into specialties. So in general practice, for example, you can become a traditional GP. I am a traditional GP in Chelsea. I work as a salaried GP, which means I have typical consultant clinics in the NHS. You can also be an urgent care or A&E GP as well. So I have done that a lot in the past, where you go into A&E and you're dealing with patients as soon as they come into the hospital through the A&E doors, or they've got a minor illness that just needs urgent treatment. You can also specialise into other different types of medical clinical practice that aren't the traditional route. So aesthetics, I understand Dr. Juhi also does that. Loads of doctors do this, where they do sort of Botox, fillers, all sorts of things, aesthetic medicine. It's really popular, it's growing in popularity, and it's enjoyable for people, especially if they want practical skills. So there's all those different types of things you can do in clinical medicine. Now, outside of clinical medicine, if you decide you've got your medical degree, but you really don't enjoy working with members of the public, then it is a good idea to think about careers where you don't need to deal with patients face to face, but you can still use your skills that you've gained from your medical degree. So for example, you might want to go into the pharmaceutical industry. You could do research. So Dr. Juhi did touch on that as well, where you aren't so much patient facing usually, or you might use patients as test subjects, but you're not doing you're treating their illness straight away. You're testing different medicines or potential medicines, or you might be doing other sorts of research as well, looking into the causes of illness. Or you could go into a completely different field of research, because medical school degrees give you a lot of skills that are transferable to other specialties. You could decide to scrap medicine altogether and go into something like finance. And having a medical degree is incredibly desirable to a lot of employers around the country and the world. You might decide you want to go on to Wall Street or onto Fleet Street or something like that and work for like a big corporation. And having a medical degree is looked favourably because of the skills that it gives you. It shows that you're a hard worker. And you might decide to start your own business, become an entrepreneur. There's loads of doctors who do that. They might even do that on the side of their general medical career as well. You might go into media medicine as well, which is where you go on the TV, radio, do social media, that sort of thing. I do a little bit of media medicine, working with BBC Three Counties Radio mostly, and just go on there and you're like the GP that talks to the presenter, and it's all very nice. It's good fun. You tend to do it once you've done a few years in medicine, because otherwise it's you might not know what to say. but yeah, some people do it earlier on as well in their career. And you might also see doctors who have their name and they've got their medical qualifications, but the fact they're a doctor makes people feel better about what they're doing. So for example, the Doctor's Kitchen, he does beautiful recipes. You've probably come across him. He's got his own TV show now, and it's the Doctor's Kitchen. It's healthy eating, healthy recipes he's doing, but it's not technically like treating patients, talking about illness. It's more like healthy living, and you having that doctor title is really beneficial. It gives people in the public a sense of trust in you, in what you're doing. Also, you might decide that you want to do law, accountancy, landscape gardener, anything. You don't have to limit yourself. Once you've got a degree, you've got a degree. And the medical degree, like I said, it's very highly looked upon. You might even decide to do something that doesn't require a degree. You could drop out after a couple of years of medical school because you decide you didn't want to do that. It's not the end of the world. At the end of the day, you've got one life to lead, and you've got to enjoy yourself and do what feels right for you. And also, you know, it's worth getting support throughout, because there were times in medical school where I thought, I'm not doing the right thing. But once I plugged through, now, 10, 15 years later, I am really glad that I carried on doing it. There are other friends of mine who decided to quit and go into law, and they're much happier now. But you only know by trying at the end of the day. So it's an incredibly wonderful thing to do. Good luck if you decide to apply for medicine as well. Many thanks for your time today. And I wish you the best of luck in whatever you do. Whether you get into medical school or not, I wish you the best with your future. Ultimately, like I said, one life to lead, and I hope you find happiness in whatever you do. That's it. And if you want to connect with me, the best way is actually through Instagram. Happy for you to DM me, although I'm very slow to reply to DMs, as Medapply know. Sorry about that. But I'm on @dr.tesh. I do lots of sort of articles and videos about medical conditions, bits and bobs about life as well. And I also have a focus on Buddhism, because I am a Buddhist, and sometimes it helps with some of the rubbish that's going on in the world right now to think about these principles. So if you are interested in that, then just drop me a DM or follow me, and I would love to connect with you. Okay, thanks for your time.